All right, thank you all so much for having me. I love the Kansas City area. I always come to the Fox Kids Day at the K as well every year. I've been doing that for about 8 years now, and I've done a lot of storm chasing in the Kansas City area also. I was on the storms in the May 4, 2003, and also earlier this spring I was chasing that interesting tornado that happened in the southeast side of Kansas City when it was more of a squall line type thing or a quasi-linear convective system. But I'm very happy to be here. I was down in the Florida Keys for Hurricane Irma recently, which was absolutely devastated down there. I rode it out in Key West. We found a very solid structure, which we were able to go up and floor if we needed to with the storm surge. And we were on the western eye wall of Hurricane Irma, and then to drive out, we basically had to shovel our way out. There was a horrible debris. There were boats on Highway 1. Part of the highway was in the water there. Thankfully, the key deer were okay for the most part. They were able to survive the hurricane, and that's just an endangered species. They're deer that are about the size of dogs that are only found in this one key, Big Pine Key, and they were able to huddle in the mangroves there. And my friend who I storm chased with, Mike Tice, he was able to check on the key deer yesterday, but a lot of the homes there are not so lucky. Many of the homes are destroyed, so they need all the help that they can get in the recovery effort. And not only there, but also Hurricane Harvey. We were in Rockport for that Category 4 hurricane, and then I was in Houston covering the flooding for AccuWeather. And I also have a tornado probe that I designed this year, so I don't drive into the tornadoes anymore with armored vehicles, so I place an unmanned probe in the path of the tornado now, and so I'll show you that as well. And we brought that down to the hurricanes too. We measured the winds and pressure inside the eye wall of Hurricane Harvey, so I'll show you that plot as well. And I'll show you new videos from both storms, so it's very, very recent. And I'll talk about the tornadoes that we've chased recently. I was actually in the white rental car there up next to that tornado. That was May 24, 2016, and my friend Derek shot that from right behind. And this was a tornado too that was paralleling this road. It was moving from south to north. And when I chase tornadoes, I like to do what's called a hook slice maneuver, where I approach it from the up sheer side. So this was on a north-south road, and I was approaching it from the south, and I was able to just allow the tornado to move away from me. And that's one thing good when you approach a tornado from the west, or well, it depends on which way it's moving. When you do a hook slice maneuver, you can always have an escape route of just sitting there and allowing the tornado to move away from you. And I'll also talk about the evolution of the armored vehicles, or the Dominators, which we intercepted tornadoes directly. I wish that I had that down for these hurricanes, and that I could have parked it on top of a bridge and then dropped it down to the ground and put the spikes into the pavement and then recorded data and ridden in the vehicle as well. But because Hurricane Harvey was so strong and Hurricane Irma was so intense, we weren't able to go out and venture out into the conditions, but you basically have to be in a concrete structure or downwind of a concrete structure. And even then, I wouldn't recommend it. And so I'll start with a video first of tornado chasing. This is from 2013, and instead of describing what we do, it's a lot easier to show you through video. And I am a lot more nervous up here presenting in front of you than I was in the Florida Keys for Hurricane Irma, so bear with me if I start slow here. And again, this is from the 2013 season, and this will show our armored vehicles in action that I'll talk about later, and I'll show video from inside tornadoes and the data that we collected from these vehicles. Violent tornado. Let's intercept. Let's go forward. It's moving southeast. Moving southeast. And
dude, that's the scariest 200-yard ride of my life. My life flashed before my eyes.
I'm just glad you're okay.
Dude, I'm good. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
This is a dangerous situation for all of us. It's all about saving people's lives in our own backyard.
Chasing in Oklahoma is the most violent of the violent. That's why Reed is here.
Hi, I'm Reed Timber, proud new member of the Forewarned Storm Team.
We are under a tornado watch until 10 p.m. tonight.
You can see the rising scud there, and that's the new circulation. That area could easily put down a tornado very soon.
And hey, it's Cantori, man. Right in the town of Edmond, Oklahoma.
Tornado on the ground.
Stop right here. The debris too big.
Maybe 50 yards right now. There's debris over my head.
Oh my God, it's a large
Oh,
wedge.
it's huge. Look at that. See the horizontal vortices?
Yes, this is
Oh
a
my
violent
goodness.
tornado, guys. Hold on. Careful. This is bad damage here. Good job. When a tornado is not moving side to side, it's coming right at you. This one is coming right at us. Watch the door! We'll get ripped off. Dude, we gotta go! Reed! Drive! All right, let's go forward! Go! You can see the tornado coming down. That's violent. Yes, it is. Oh, helical vortices! Listen to that! Right now, we got a violent tornado right over. See the helical configuration here.
We're being 153 right now. Windows up. Drop down or not?
Go! We're going inside. Blast through. We're going inside it.
We're in it, guys. We're in it right now.
We're inside it! And so that was from 2013, and you saw we were able to storm chase with Jim Cantori there, and he actually flew in about a half hour before we saw that tornado. We met him on the side of the road, picked him up, and then intercepted that tornado. And I was also storm chasing for Channel 4 in Oklahoma City then, and we have a team of storm chasers where we're constantly chasing storms and relaying that information live. I was with them for 4 years, and now I'm with AccuWeather, so I get to, I like to have more of a nationwide range or even up into southern Canada, so it works better. AccuWeather has been great to also allow me to get back into the science. Also, I'm allowed to design the tornado probe again and start recording data as well, because I've had to take a few year break from that and regroup financially. And this is the Hurricane Harvey slide. There you can see Rockport, Texas, made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane in Aransas Pass. We rode it out in Rockport. It had maximum sustained winds of 130 miles an hour, dropped over 50 inches of rain also across parts of East Texas, which is the most storm total rainfall that's ever happened from any storm as well. And there you can see the tornado probe down there. It looks like this has been phase shifted a little bit to the southeast. But that image on the right is a radar image that you can see those little indentations that are rotating around inside the eye. Those are actually those tornado-like mesovortices. And so as that eye was coming in, it was a much bigger eye, but they also have vortices that rotate around inside. And there were about 4 or 5 of those that were spinning around the eye. There you can see our location in Rockport. And we actually saw a few of those visually. And what would happen is you'd have sustained winds of about 120 miles an hour, then one of those vortices would come by and then it would ramp up and the winds would gust over 140 miles an hour. There were little pressure perturbations also as those rotated by. And we deployed our tornado probe on a bridge too, just north of Rockport. We ratchet strapped it to the edge there, and then thankfully the probe survived. We came back and I was able to pull the data off of it. And this is what that data looked like. And the blue is the wind speed. And there's the probe in the upper right. Ratchet strapped to the side of that bridge, and that was pretty intense because when we were deploying that, we probably had winds of 70 or 80 miles an hour, and then a tornado warning came over my phone. So you get a lot of tornado warnings or supercells that'll spin around in the outer bands of the tornadoes, and you could see a few pressure falls as some of those tornado-like vortices were happening in the eye wall there. Obviously, the calm of the eye happens in the middle. That's coincident with the minimum pressure. But my probe actually measured pressures that were lower in that eye wall as those tornado-like vortices were rotating by. So that's definitely an interesting result. And you can see all the variability in the pressure data too in that eye wall, and I believe that's as those vortices were going around. But one thing I definitely want to improve with this probe is I want to extend the anemometer a lot higher. I think that our maximum wind gusts of 120 miles an hour underrepresented the winds that were actually happening, but there's value in data right near the ground and also aloft as well, and that relationship between the winds that happen well above the ground versus those experienced at the surface that cause the damage is still a big mystery in not only hurricanes, but also tornadoes. And now I'll play a video and show you what that eye wall sounded like. And it almost sounded like a zipper if you listen. When the wind would ramp up and go by the buildings and the power lines, it had a very distinct sound. And we were trying to find shelters in advance, but then it turned a little bit left. And the only one we could find, we were told it was rated up to Category 5, but we got there and it wasn't a concrete structure. And the whole side of the hotel came down and the wind was rushing in there a bit. And I was on the 3rd floor, and I could feel the whole thing swaying back and forth, which was definitely intense. But sadly, the town of Rockport up to Holiday Beach and down to Aransas Pass just sustained total devastation. It looked like a EF3 tornado path when we went through. Thankfully, though, most residents evacuated, and people heeded those warnings and evacuation orders for both hurricanes. Some of the biggest evacuations we've ever seen in U.S. history. I believe Hurricane Irma was actually the biggest evacuation ever, and so people are definitely getting out of the path of these, which is a good thing. And the forecasters and meteorologists are getting a lot better at forecasting them, and technology has changed a lot. And I'll also talk about how technology has evolved over my storm chasing career and how I got into meteorology, and I'll show you my very first storm chasing vehicle, which was a 1985 Plymouth Reliant. But it had a blown out muffler, so it sounded like a Harley coming down the road. And so here's Hurricane Harvey in Rockport. If you could turn it up to the max so we can hear the sound. You can see the vehicles rock. I thought that satellite truck was going to get thrown into my rental car. And that's, I think, as those mesovortices were going by. And somehow the power stayed on right up until just when the eye wall was about to transition to the eye. Now that tree's coming down. So we're standing downwind of the structure, basically, maybe close to a slight angle. See, there's somebody driving out there too. I wouldn't drive out there, for sure, unless we had the armored vehicle or had the Dominator mounted in the middle of the road with, there you can see power flashes. Wow. These are the strongest winds I've ever experienced in a hurricane. It felt like being in a tornado, except you were in it for almost an hour or two in the eye wall. It was moving so slow. Downwind of the structure here, and it sucked my AccuWeather hat away. Every single time I'm chasing a tornado or a hurricane, I lose a hat and it blows away. Who knows where they end up? And you can see lightning as well in the eye wall too, as that convection was coming ashore. The more intense hurricanes will often have lightning in the eye wall. And this is in the front eye wall, so the front eye wall is the strongest, and then the back eye wall was much weaker. This is extreme meteorologist Reed Timmer from Port Lavaca, Texas, as that first rain squall is coming in. And Port Lavaca had a really bad storm surge as well. The storm surge is bad all the northeast of the center.
Just off to the south and those strong easterly winds.
You know, all we can do is pray.
Water's already up over 2 feet here in Port O'Connor, and the hurricane is still well offshore.
There, when we were mounting the probe.
The hurricane probe here to report preliminary data.
My friend dropped a screw to the mast in the Gulf of Mexico there too, so we had to fasten it down.
Effectively stalled out on top of us.
There
We're
you can
stuck
see those
in the middle of
vortices.
the eye wall here.
And this is the back eye wall. And that's why you don't want to be standing out in those winds, because sheet metal can blow by and
Up against the vehicle. That is insane.
One wall of the hotel, one staircase.
But I set my car out there and I put a camera in the car, and then I left the vehicle out in the, and then there you saw the edge of the hotel, and then this is the devastation here. And they have a long road of recovery ahead, so.
The main street of Rockport,
That blue
Texas
shed there was where my friend Jeff
Thankfully, it looks
Petrowski
like
was
almost
parked next to
everybody
during the hurricane,
evacuated.
and it kept him protected from debris. But it's a famous blue shed there. And what made Harvey unique was that this was just the beginning of the storm. And then in Houston, the flooding began and the rain just kept falling. There were tornado warnings, hundreds of tornado warnings.
Houston at the intersection of Interstate 45 and Highway 59.
The water
I can't
smelled like a
believe
dryer
this is an
sheet, believe it or not.
actual highway,
Really weird.
and the water is up to the signs. You can barely see the signs.
Just an absolute lake. I was seeing helicopters flying outside today, and I looked up thinking I was going to see a Coast Guard helicopter, but we saw so many helicopters during these hurricanes.
We have an evacuation plan in place. But hopefully we won't need it.
Rushing water, and this is in downtown. And that's one of the bayous. They call it bayou, or creeks, bayous down there. There are several different bayous that flooded. They basically looked like the Mississippi River. And this is greater than 50 inches of rain. Here's one of the bayous in downtown Houston where it was almost over the top of those bridges. Well, that's the scariest thing to cover is definitely the floodwaters out of all those, and it can trap you in there too, as that one did. We tried all the easterly options and north, and then I got sick from drinking the water, and so then I just laid in my room, and my camera guy had to drive us out of there, and he found a way through webcams to navigate through to get out of Houston. But what was amazing about Hurricane Harvey were all the people that were helping out with boats. So all the outdoorsmen were showing up with their fishing boats, and everybody was helping out in the recovery effort, and boats were everywhere, saving thousands of people. The Coast Guard was there with helicopters up, and the response was absolutely incredible for both hurricanes and the evacuation also. And here's Hurricane Irma then, which was just after that. So over 2 weeks, I saw the eclipse and Hurricane Harvey, then Hurricane Irma, and then I was here. And I was just going to see my mom, too, for the fall. She's based out of South Carolina, so I was using that as a staging point for these. But these are the images that we first released from the Keys, the lower Keys. Upper left is Key West. That's Duval Street. That's where people do the Duval crawl there. But that's the storm surge off of the Gulf of Mexico side. So when this hurricane came in, it sucked all the water out of the bays, and then the backside of the hurricane came, and then a lot of that was where the bad storm surge came from. The upper right are near a little further east. The three islands that really sustained the worst damage were Cudjoe Key, Summerlin Key, and also Big Pine Key, which was where the key deer are located. And that's Highway 1. So we were able to shovel our way out, and then finally saw the first responders arrive. And I spoke to a resident that rode it out in Summerlin Key, and he was in a stilt home, and it lifted the roof off. And he said that the front eye wall wasn't as bad, and then the calm of the eye came. And then when the backside of the storm came, the wall of water, that storm surge came, and he saw boats floating by, and then he said the roof instantly was lifted off, and he rode it out in his bathroom, and then, but he survived the storm, and there were about 10 people that stayed behind in Summerlin Key, which is a lower elevation one as well, which is definitely scary. But there you could see the track of Irma, and some of the worst of the damage was in the Caribbean, or the worst, in the northern Leeward Islands. I read an article today that said Barbuda, for the first time in 300 years, nobody lives there now. So, in many of these islands, over 90% of the structures were destroyed, if not all of them. Went over the British Virgin Islands, and they definitely need all the help they can get out there as well. And the power is cut off. So, and now I'll show you what it looked like from the lower Keys. And then we'll show you some tornado videos. And what it looks like inside of a tornado as well, and data that I collected in there.
The West has been here a lot longer than these hurricanes have been around, so it's pretty tough island.
Hurricane Irma is approaching from that direction. You can see massive waves off in the horizon off to the south.
We were on the bad side of Wilma.
Yeah.
And now we're on the good side of this one, so hopefully it ain't going to be so bad.
With a wobble back to the west or a wobble to the right, that can mean all the difference in just how catastrophic the conditions are going to be across the lower Keys. It's going to get a lot worse than that. And that was the southernmost monument there in the U.S.
Here it comes, here it comes.
That's my friend Mike Tice. He has a hurricane eyewall research vehicle he calls the HERV. So it's basically a vehicle with this large anemometer on the top, and we strapped it to a bridge, and he measured 120 mile per hour wind gusts. And Irma.
That's a big time current right there.
The winds are out of the north because we're on the western eye wall.
All the trees have been sheared off right at the top of it.
And this is on the east side of Key West, and then we started driving east right after this. Here the water started inundating a lot of the businesses on Duval Street.
you know, there's 40 bridges.
Yeah.
I imagine one of those bridges is going to be down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, there's no way to find out right now.
But we were posting these videos, and loved ones would recognize people too. So I would see on Twitter, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that's my such bad destruction behind stepmom's," you know. But they would recognize people, know that their loved ones were safe. And then this is going east. This is in
I was
the
just watching stuff getting ripped down around me.
Cudjoe Key area, Summerlin Key. Babies, that famous coffee shop, was actually serving coffee the next morning.
It was intense, and then it just, everything went calm.
Got dead calm
That's
for a
it.
good 40, 45 minutes, and then the wind just started picking up, and that's when all hell broke loose.
The roof.
Took it off instantly, didn't peel it off, just took it off in a flash. Oh, you can see what it brought in. My neighbor's got a new hot tub.
And his neighbor's got a new hot tub.
I'm not going anywhere.
People of the Keys are incredibly optimistic, though. They're very resilient people, and you definitely feel a connection to every place that you cover.
Everybody to get out.
Storms.
And
But look
this
at all
storm
those
was just
boats.
not
There was
survivable in the Florida Keys.
gas leaking in the waterways too. I mean, the impact on the environment and the wildlife too is also really sad. It's really worried about the key deer. And it smelled like fish too, so I may still smell a little bit like the storm surge I noticed, which, sorry about that, but. And here's the satellite image. That's the GOES 16 high-resolution satellite when it was approaching the northern Leeward Islands, and that was when it was at its most intense. And it went to a Category 2 hurricane in less than 24 hours. It was which is rare for hurricanes that come off of the African coast and then take this similar track. But it impacted a lot of those islands as a Category 5. It maintained Category 5 status for the longest that any hurricane has. It was the strongest in the Atlantic Basin in terms of wind speed, and the pressure dropped to 914 millibars. You may remember Hurricane Wilma, too, that intensified rapidly. That dropped below 900 millibars, but that eye was about 2 miles wide at its strongest, or when the eye was the smallest. And I always wonder what that would look like when it came ashore. It'd probably almost be like a wedge tornado because you'd think that condensation would be all the way down to the water. But it's scary to think about. And again, Mike Tice's HERV measured 120 mile per hour wind just east of Key West, and he wasn't in it, but we strapped it to the bridge. And he went back out and then measured that wind speed. I'm not going to tell you the wind speed that my probe measured because it was pretty low. But I think it's because it was in a sheltered area, and I need to obviously increase the mast a little bit higher, and I don't think it was representative of the environment, so I still have a lot of improvements to do on that one. But here you can see more of that high-resolution satellite imagery, and sadly, there have been at least 79 fatalities across the Caribbean and in Florida. And now I'll talk about storm chasing and how I got into storm chasing also. This is from 2008, my first season with Discovery Channel, and my first we were actually dropping an instrument probe in the path of tornadoes then as well. And this is what my face looks like when I'm about 100 yards from a tornado. I can't help it, but before this time, before 2008, I was always behind the camera shooting tornadoes, so I wasn't aware that I looked like this. And so you know how your voice, you don't like the sound of your own voice when you record it? Like this took that whole experience to a whole new level when I saw this for the first time. And I'll play the video behind this, and then I'll tell you the story, because it's not exactly how it looked, but there is a fun story behind it. I try to maximize. There we go.
The tornado warning remains in effect until 8:15 p.m. for Stuttgart.
It was a big deal with the HDV cameras back then too, which is why my bio says that things have changed a lot since then. Now it's just a cell phone you could shoot an equivalent video.
This has gotten bad. We're literally about 2 minutes and 20 seconds in front of this storm.
We're going where no sane research team has ever gone before. We need to get out of here.
Oh yeah.
Go east.
I see it. I see it.
We've got a tornado warning issued here in Dawson County. We're approaching rapidly from the southeast.
So we built the Dominator the next season.
Right back here. This is massive walk out
just
here.
in a regular SUV back then.
I hate lightning. Shut the window! Oh my gosh, I can't see anything!
I watched the suction board to see this tornado too.
Back up, Joel! Back up, there's the breeze!
Yeah. Well, I wasn't talking to the guy behind the wheel in that one, but that was our first time working with a production vehicle with storm chasers. So we had one follow vehicle, and our goal was we were trying to drop an instrument pack in the path of a tornado. It was basically a 300-pound, well, about a 100-pound block of cement. We mixed the cement in my garage, and then we mounted cameras on it and instruments. And our goal was to deploy the pod, and then we'd approach it from the north. We'd leave the production vehicle up there. We'd drop the pod, and then we'd come back and meet up with them a safe distance away from it, then watch the tornado move over the instrument pack and then go retrieve it. This is my first year working with them, and our microphones were hooked up to their radio system so they could hear everything that we said. And after we dropped the probe in the ground, we looked up, and the tornado was a lot closer than it should have been. It was moving a little bit faster, and so we put the car in reverse. And then I remembered that the production vehicle was up there, and I saw their taillights right in the path of the tornado, and so I started yelling, "Back up, car 2," and it got louder and more high-pitched, and they cut out the car 2 part, so it just looked like I was yelling at Joel. And then that's my first storm chasing vehicle. That's a Plymouth Reliant in the upper left, and I grew up in Michigan, and I started, my first storm chases were actually lake effect snow squalls up there. So I never saw a tornado until 1998, my first year at Oklahoma. So October 4, 1998 was my first tornado, and I've been storm chasing ever since. But I've always loved weather and wanted to be a storm chaser ever since I was about 5 years old. And I collected insects between the age of 5 and 18 until I caught an eastern Hercules beetle, and then I retired from that and realized that my true passion was meteorology. And I was also into tree identification of reptiles and amphibians, and I was in Science Olympiad, so I was a late bloomer, definitely, very into the sciences, and I still am. Nothing has changed. After that, one of the vehicles I had was a Chevy Lumina up there that I had to hold together with duct tape. And I pushed that vehicle about 20,000 miles without changing the oil. And because the hood was stuck in the down position, so I got in an accident, and so I fixed it with duct tape and got some headlights from AutoZone that I screwed on the front. And I would continually get pulled over in that vehicle because they said it looked suspicious, and I could see why. But then we were driving back from Minnesota one time, and all these alarms started going off, and the power steering gave out, the brakes weren't working properly, and then some type of smoke filled the inside that smelled like antifreeze, and we blew a gasket. And there were 5 of us packed in the vehicle, so we pulled over, and then I just left the vehicle on the side of the road. And I think we donated it to the Kidney Foundation at the end. And then the Dominators are on the bottom, so I had a bunch of beater vehicles in between the Lumina and the Dominators on the bottom. And the first vehicle that I ever got from a bank was a SUV, and then a year later I turned it into the Dominator 1 on the right. And I just finally paid off that vehicle about 5 years ago, and they never knew that I turned it into that on the right. So just a slightly modified Chevy Tahoe. And I'll go over all the specs of all the different vehicles, but the newest one is Dominator 3. That's in the middle. And that one's owned by my friend Sean, who is up in Canada. Dominator 1 and 2 have so many miles on them that they can't really be driven. They can be pushed, but not driven. But we did test them out after we intercepted tornadoes in the show as part of the Mythbusters, where we parked Dominator 1 behind a jet aircraft and simulated winds of about 300 miles an hour. But they were still straight line winds, so the difference is that tornado winds are continuously accelerating, and you also have updrafts that will happen as well. But I'll show you this really quick. And that's the TIV on the right. That's Sean Casey's vehicle, which I think could handle a much stronger tornado than ours. We wanted to stay mobile, and my plan originally was never to intercept tornadoes, but somehow it happened anyway. It was really cold out there too. It was about 10 degrees. So there were some ice chunks that were slamming the vehicle, which almost simulates debris, I would think. But imagine if we had this for the hurricanes. We could have parked this in the middle of that road and easily could have handled the 150. It smelled like engine fuel in there afterwards. I asked them if they'd let me ride it out in there, but they said no for insurance purposes.
Uh-oh, Dominator moving.
And one of the Mythbusters guy designed a mobile shelter, so he actually got down behind that engine in this little thing that he built and laid on the ground, and he was okay. But
yeah,
the problem is if he gets a side wind or anything from the back, he would have been in big trouble. But the concept of the vehicles were to have hydraulics, so we have a basically a bulletproof exterior that would protect us from the flying debris, and then we drop the shell flush to the ground so no wind could get underneath. And so our goal was to simulate basically a NASCAR vehicle or Formula One vehicle. They're designed to go so fast and not lift off the ground by keeping a low profile and minimizing the uplift due to Bernoulli effect as that wind goes up and over the vehicle. And we tested other regular vehicles behind the jet aircraft, and the wind going underneath and then the wind going above the vehicle more rapidly caused those to lift off the ground, and then they flew like 50 or 100 feet. And so it worked to a point, but honestly, I wouldn't trust those vehicles are intercepting any tornado anymore. It was just a phase I was going through, I think. Thankfully, we're okay. So storm chasing motivations are threefold. The number one priority out there of the network of storm chasers is to report what's happening. The great thing these days with so many storm chasers out there is it's very difficult for a storm to go unseen, and most importantly, it's always reported most of the time. And so that's very important in the warning process, and storm chasers work very closely with the Weather Service offices and news media to get the word out and report on the conditions. And we're the storm chasing community. We may not be good at a lot of things, but one thing we do know is how to chase storms and do it safely as well. And so I think that the popularity of storm chasing, the positive is that it's definitely helping in the warning process. Disaster response is also another one. Many times we come across damage, and when we do, we end the chase and go house to house and help out the best we can until emergency personnel have control of the situation. And also data collection, that's my obsession now, and the reason that we built the Dominators is so I could get close, if not inside of a tornado, and then measure the wind speeds of the suction vortices that rotate around inside. And we mounted a vertical radar on the top of the Dominator to measure vertical winds inside tornadoes. We had anemometers mounted on them also, and we did that through our Discovery Channel days. And then ran out of cash, so I had to put that on hold for a little while. And now I'm back with AccuWeather too, and they're helping me get back into the science again. So I've been designing probes, and I hope to make a lot more of those in the off season, and then lay out an array of tornado probes, maybe with short-range radar to measure the wind speeds in those suction vortices. And these are those suction vortices. Even the smallest tornadoes can have them. The strongest ones usually do. And the biggest mystery of tornadoes is when they interact with the friction of the earth. That's above the friction layer. Tornadoes are a relatively simple vortex where the horizontally rotating winds are roughly equivalent to the updraft. But right near the ground is where things get interesting and mysterious. We don't know a lot exactly about the relationship between the winds above the friction layer and what happens right at the ground. But Dr. Fiedler at the University of Oklahoma modeled these suction vortices years ago, and he found that the wind speed inside the suction vortices could reach 2 to 4 times that of the main tornado. So the friction of the earth can indirectly act to accelerate the wind at a given point, even though it's more concentrated in those vortices. And that's why you'll get one house that'll sustain complete damage, whereas the one next door will be left untouched. And so my goal in building the Dominators was to try to measure those winds and get a radar that could maybe point horizontally to measure the wind speeds inside. But we were able to get an X-band radar that was pointed in the vertical, but it didn't have pan and tilt capabilities. So we modified it to measure the updrafts in the tornadoes from inside. So you could basically get a profile of the vertical motion. Here are some more of those vortices, and they have a helical configuration as they're going up because there's not only horizontal winds but also updrafts in tornadoes, and that's why they get that structure. And the strongest winds are where the pressure is lowest, and that's also where the air can condense most easily, and that's why you see those condensation funnels where the strongest winds are happening and the lowest pressure is happening. So Dr. Fiedler showed that those lowest pressure falls happen right near the ground. And so I saw a video of these the first time in 2007 when I was really close to a tornado that was a rope tornado, but it sounded like a jet engine because you could tell it was violent. And you couldn't see them with the naked eye, but when you looked at the video, you could see those suction vortices just ripping around in there. They were translating at probably 200 miles an hour, and each one had its own rotation. So it's easy to see that the wind speeds could get that strong, and who knows how strong they get inside those suction vortices. They could just be a meter or two wide, and we'd always say what would happen if one of those impacted the armored vehicle, because you'd have wind about 400 miles an hour one way and then wind 400 miles per hour the other way, right next to each other. So there'd be incredible amounts of shear on the vehicle, but that's how you could see why the damage is so bad with tornadoes. And that's Dominator 1 and 2. The Homeowners Association was not a big fan of me. That's why I eventually moved from my neighborhood. But the Dominator 1 broke down in the driveway, and I just got hammered by letters, eventually a lawsuit. And I thought they looked nice. You know, they were almost like an art piece out there. But you can see all the instruments on the Dominator 2 there. Those are the instruments that collect the data. And there's no point in intercepting a tornado. There's no point. You shouldn't do it anyway. But I felt that if we were going to get close to a tornado, we should have, or if inside, we should definitely have instruments on top of the vehicle. The problem is many times they didn't work. And there you can see a very large tornado with the vehicle right near the base. And you don't want to intercept all tornadoes back then. You could definitely tell the ones that were really violent. This one right here was over a mile wide near Bowdle, South Dakota. And it was moving so slow that if you were in that tornado, you'd likely be in there for several minutes, even experiencing winds over 300 miles an hour with suction vortices going by. So you definitely want to respect tornadoes and their potential power as well, because they can go from nothing to really strong. And I'll show you when that happened when we were inside of it in the next video. And there you can see an air cannon system mounted on the back right. And with that, we would hit a big red button inside when we were getting close to the tornado, and it would shoot parachute probes inside that would get carried around by the updraft, and they would measure temperature, moisture, and pressure inside. We also had a 15-foot wingspan drone back then that we would drop parachute probes out of the base of it, and that was one of the few things we did that actually worked. But I have a Google Earth animation of those probes going around inside and circulating around in the tornado. But the hard part is to penetrate the core flow, or penetrate the actual tornado vortex. It's easy to get a probe to go around the outside, but there's almost a shroud around it. There's sinking air around that tornado, and the tornado itself is a vortex of more moist inflow air that's also lower pressure, so it's condensed. And there's basically an updraft surrounded by more generally sinking motion. And so it's very difficult to get a probe from outside the tornado inside unless you have some kind of propulsion. And we experimented with a lot of rockets and those types of things, which we probably weren't allowed to videotape. But then we tried the air cannons, and that one shoulder-mounted air cannon I was trying to deploy on that tornado in 2013 in the first video was what we were down to in 2013. And on that one, I was trying to run a few hundred yards so I could shoot the shoulder-mounted air cannon in the inflow region of the tornado. And it was relatively slow moving, and I told my friend and the Dominator to come pick us up after I shoot it, and he forgot. And so when the tornado was really close, I look up and I see the Dominators on the horizon, and I was about a quarter mile away at this point. I had to run a lot further to get to the inflow part of the tornado. And so we were running against these 100-mile-an-hour easterly winds in the north side of the tornado and barely made it to the armored vehicles, and then got out of the path. And then the tornado destroyed everything. The shoulder-mounted air cannon I never found. The probes that we mounted on the barbed wire fence were gone, and the trackers were destroyed. And there was a pile of cattle in the middle of that tornado because it was not moving. It was just stationary, but wobbling a little bit, and it sucked all the debris into the middle. And we think that some of our cameras and probes and the air cannon may be in there in that pile of debris. And so I went to school for 15 years, continuous enrollment at the University of Oklahoma, and was storm chasing a lot at the same time. And then 2007 to 2008, the Storm Chasers show started, and everything started happening real fast. And then I was doing lots of speaking events and traveling and doing windshield wiper commercials and TurboTax and Bud Light. And then next thing I know, I'm here again, and that was all. But I did launch a website too before that called tornadovideos.net. And so we were called TVN in the Discovery Show, and it was the abbreviation for this first website that I designed, or my friend Dean designed. And this was back in 2003, and I realized that I didn't have to work at the golf course anymore over the summers when I could sell DVDs and sell footage to shows like World's Most Amazing Videos or World's Dumbest Drivers. I sold a lot of video to that series too, and I even did interviews where I had to act like I was a tourist just driving, and all my windows got blown out by hail just to license video. So we started this website to sell DVDs to help pay for gas, and my friend was an expert in ranking websites, and that's why we named it tornadovideos.net. And then once social media started, I when YouTube began, I unloaded my whole entire extreme footage library on YouTube and put a website watermark on there. So when those went viral, all these people were coming to the website, and I was going to the post office every day, shipping out DVDs, and I did that until 2007. And then storm chasers happened for the next 4 years. And then also tried to do the tours as well for a while, and I'm not very good at, it's just not a good idea for me. Other people are very good at it, but for me, I think that my style of storm chasing didn't mesh well with that. But and so then we launched TVN Weather, which was a live streaming platform. This was after storm chasers, and we wanted to find a way to have a network of storm chasers that were streaming live video through a website and their GPS location to help use the technologies that had evolved over time with live streaming and data to help streamline the warning process. And those are all different GPS locations of storm chasers that were in our network. My friend Seth is a really good programmer, and he was able to design apps and all kinds of things on there. There you could see a tornado that was streamed by the Dominator. And our plan was to make this available for cell phones so that any citizen could stream. If they saw a storm, they could stream through our website. But we realized that might have been difficult to manage. And we never rolled that out. And then Facebook deployed their mobile streaming, and Periscope came out. And so I wish that we had deployed the mobile streaming of storm chasing. But the problem is that the data fees increased to like tens of thousands of dollars a month during peak storm chasing season, and it ran the whole thing dry in about 2 years or so, and then we had to shut it down. But we had warning polygons that were on there live streaming, and you could see the suction vortices there. Those are the Dominators. We added a storm reporting feature where a storm chaser could hashtag a storm report, TVNWX, on Twitter, and then it would automatically post the report to the map and shared through social media. But the data fees are difficult. That's why live streaming platforms of high magnitude are limited to the large companies out there. But it was close to working out. But it's a blessing that it did it, because now I'm able to storm chase for AccuWeather as well, and then chase all these storms, and now getting back into the science as well. And we also even had storm chasers that were out in the southwest U.S. that were streaming the monsoon season in late summer, early fall. And here's the evolution of the Dominator 1, too. I'll show you the video that caused that flesh wound on my face there next. But it started off as a regular Chevy Tahoe like that. And I had it for about a week, and it was covered, hammered by hail dents in the Super Tuesday, February 5th, 2008 tornado outbreak. So I got it in late January, and then instantly covered it in hail dents, and then turned it into the Dominator on the bottom. So we had to shave off the roof as well and ramp up the shocks. And the whole goal was to have an armor on the outside, but the 16-gauge steel didn't cut it. So we shot a 2x4 at that armor at about 200 miles an hour, and it went straight through. So that's why we added the polyethylene Kevlar composite spray to the outside. So we worked with Line-X for a lot, and we worked with Rhino lining too, but then that lifted up like a sail in 1 minute. But the Line-X worked really well. And I'll show you a video from one of our first intercepts in 2009. So we never really got to test it out. We just got the vehicle, and then we were intercepting tornadoes right away, but we kind of eased into it a little bit. But this day in 2009, June 17, the moisture was cleared out a little bit by morning convection. And so the storms were high-based, but they would produce these rope tornadoes. And so we got a little bit overconfident, and just lost the mouse. There it is. And so this, looking up, you'll see a cinnamon bun feature. That's what a tornado looks like when you look straight up at it.
Oh, it's right back there now.
And it had a little dust swirl on the ground. But see, I thought it was just going to be a weak tornado, but you'll see how quickly it goes from this dust swirl to a wedge. You can play real loud volume if you want to hear it. See, even here are some suction vortices that are spinning faintly as it's interacting with the friction of the earth. That was Joel behind me there in his pickup. We were having he quit the team, remember, back then, some of the drama that they made happen. And you can see the upward motion as well, but the complexities in a tornado, even in a weak one here, are really evident. And now you can see the closed rotation really starting to become apparent. You'll see a suction vortex develop on the left side of the road.
Standing radar.
We're inside it right now. Look at this.
Look around, man, it's awesome.
All right, it's right, left. All right, we gotta get out of here.
And so we had a roof-mounted camera, and that'll show you the suction vortex as it approached. There was a pressure wave on the ground.
We're rocking. It's right there. We're in it, almost. That's right. Yeah. Wow. Maybe I shut the window. What do you think?
Yeah, window up.
There you go.
Stay down.
Okay, it's gonna be intense, you guys. Hang on.
So watch the suction
We're in
vortex
front of us,
come
Chris.
around the
Look,
backside.
we're in it. Here's popping.
Standing radar.
Right there.
We're inside it right now. Look at this.
Ground.
Look around, man, it's awesome.
All right, it's right, left. All right, here you go.
That was the sound of the window blowing out there from the sand that was hitting the window.
We're good. We're up the window now. Here, let me get out.
And the town of Aurora, Nebraska was just to the east of there. I think they roped out just west of town. And adrenaline caused you to just sprint in random directions like that too. And blow off some steam. But storm chasers were relaying reports of this tornado up and down this road, and the people in Aurora, Nebraska were taking shelter. The sirens were going off at this time, so they had ample lead time. You can even see the lights of that town just to the east, but thankfully the tornado lifted and roped out just west of the town, which is always good. There's tornadoes, they may appear beautiful in nature, but the dark side that they leave behind are what we're trying to prevent as storm chasers and meteorologists. And there's all kinds of tornado shelters now these days, and with social media and cell phones, I think that the warning process is definitely reaping the benefits of all the technology. And that intercept also motivated a lot of improvements. We added automated Lexan windows that would lift. We used to have to manually lift the Lexan windows, but we didn't think that we needed it in that time, so that's why I rolled up the regular windows on the inside. And then we got Lexan window inserts as well. And we made the air cannon system so it was integrated in with the shell. And that dome right there is what houses the radar that points in the vertical that would measure the vertical the updrafts inside tornadoes. And that day that the window was blown out, we were deploying our drone in the air. I got a lot of letters in the mail from the FAA after that, but that shut down my aerial attack. And but we were deploying parachute probes all around those early tornadoes, and we were intercepting at the base, scanning vertical winds in the tornado. We were measuring the wind at the ground with the anemometer. So that day when the window got blown out was the day that everything was working as well. We also built the Dominator 3 after that has the gull wing doors. It's built on a diesel, a truck as well. So it took us about a minute to get to 60 miles an hour in the Dominators 1 and 2, but this one is definitely a lot faster acceleration. Of course, we always go at below the speed limit. And this is a picture of the mobile Doppler radar that was mounted on the roof of Dominator 1 and 2, intended to measure the vertical winds inside tornadoes. This is similar to the one that Dr. Howie Bluestein, who's one of my favorite a storm scientists, tornado scientists, one of the most famous ones in the world. I also took all of his classes at Oklahoma, but he had one of these that he handheld and measured the wind speeds inside wall clouds. He was one of the first people to do that. And we also experienced with different rockets, drones, RC vehicles. But we realized that combustion was something that you don't want to involve with storm chasing also. So it's best to go with the compressed air. But one time we had the air cannon all charged up, and I guess that the glue wasn't quite dry in it. And one person was in the vehicle, and we stopped at a gas station, and a bunch of people were approaching to take pictures of the Dominator, and the air cannon exploded and blew out the back window. This huge, loud bang, and everybody that was coming at the vehicle started running away from it. Full speed. So we also experimented with Zorb probes as well. Those are normally those things that humans get in and then run into each other and run around inside. So I realized how difficult it was to get an instrument into a suction vortex. So I figured that I would use the pressure and the airflow wanting to go in toward the suction vortices to our advantage. And so we thought that if we place instruments in the Zorb, that they'd be able to get sucked into the suction vortices even from a distance. So if you were within range of where the winds were flowing into the suction vortex, then it'd be in a Lagrangian framework, but at least you'd be able to measure the pressure minimum inside the suction vortices, which is one where it moves with the flow. But ideally, to measure wind speed, you want a fixed point to measure the wind speed, but you could still measure the pressure with a Lagrangian framework. And there's the vertical motion that we measured with our radar inside a tornado exactly a year after the window blowout. So June 17 became an intercept day almost every single year. And this is a large multiple vortex tornado. The radar was pointed in the vertical. Our anemometer on the roof that was measuring the horizontal winds was ripped off as a debris from a barn impacted the anemometer. But we were able to measure vertical winds. And the company that I was working with, they're supposed to validate 100% this vertical wind data. I'd love to publish the horizontal wind versus the vertical wind. And here's the horizontal wind that was measured by our roof-mounted anemometer in the tornado that blew the window out. And so the blue is wind speed and the red is wind direction here. And we had measured a peak wind of 138.8 miles an hour when that suction vortex blew out the window. And these were recorded at 5 times a second. And you can see the abrupt wind shift as well. So whenever you're looking at tornado intercept data, you know that it was a direct intercept when the wind shift is coincident with the wind maximum. And so there were some that we missed by about 100 yards or so where the wind shift would be delayed or before the wind maximum, and that's how you know that you weren't directly inside. But here you can see that wind shift is exactly the same as the wind maximum. A very quick gust when that right at the back side of the tornado. And it did drop to near calm too in the middle of the tornado, which I guess you could call the eye, but it was likely just random turbulent motion in there where the wind dropped down that low. And then you could see the linear decrease, near linear decrease after the tornado passed, which was different than ahead of it. So there are all kinds of interesting features here. The wind gradually changed ahead of the tornado and then remained constant afterward. That's probably because of the westerlies and the rear flank downdraft behind the tornado. And then my mom was able to go on a storm chase in 2015. So she was coming down for graduation at the University of Oklahoma, and I picked her up from the airport, and she's not very adventurous. So I told her we were going storm chasing, and she was pleading for me to bring her to the hotel, but I thought this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I didn't think we would see that, but we ended up seeing this massive multiple vortex tornado, and my hat blew off, and she was in the back seat. I have a Yorkshire Terrier dog, and the dog was on her lap, and she was not happy. I mean, she freaking out. She's like, "You're not safe," and she was swearing, and then, but I think she liked it because afterwards she'll kind of ask to go storm chasing every now and then. Yeah. But she doesn't mind me storm chasing the tornadoes, but she hates the hurricanes when I go after because you're embedded in those conditions a lot. And when I chased Hurricane Katrina, we didn't have cell phone connection, and our car was taken away by the storm surge. And it's a long story that involves a high-speed chase with this rusty dump truck. And our law enforcement friends that we were with there, we rode it out together in the police station, and then the water was too high for us to leave, and then we went to the second floor balcony and then up to the roof, and then a bunch of fishing boats showed up, and then we were able to get to an elevated railroad track where we walked about a few miles up to the highway, and I just put my thumb up, and there was 1 or 2 vehicles that we saw the whole time, and the first one picked us up, and we hopped in the back of a pickup truck, and then went to Hammond, Louisiana, where all the employees were gone, but a very nice lady said that the people next door left, so she gave us a room key, and there was all kinds of chaos there too, a lot of crime that was happening, and so we rode out there, and then the next morning we went outside and put my thumb up again when we started walking, and another person picked us up and drove us to Jackson, Mississippi, where I was able to rent a car and then call my mom and go back to Oklahoma, but ever since then she's hated me chasing the hurricanes. Are we okay on time still? So this is a more recent tornado videos I'll show you here. This one's from 2016, and this one is in Colorado. And I'll just play a few of these. But this is a rope tornado that kind of had the power of a stronger tornado, so it was a very unique one. But you'll see a textbook hook slice maneuver here. I had to punch through the dust in the RFT to gain visual of the tornado. That's the wall cloud right there. You can see how it's high base, then it crosses the boundary, and then it's like nuts. See all the dust there? So that's in the rear plane downdraft. So you have to have the discipline to get through that dust. And then it all clears out. See the rope funnel in the middle? You know it's a strong tornado when it's high base and you have condensation all the way to the ground because it requires a lower pressure in a drier environment to get condensation. So I'm more afraid of these rope tornadoes than a wedge a lot of times. Even though you can really see where the winds are, they're very compact. So I'll be through this dust in a second, and I'm going south to north, and the tornado is moving north as well. Able to stop here once we got a little closer and then allow it to move away further.
They look okay.
There are people that were in a vehicle actually right there too. I got lucky. You'll see the condensation all the way to the ground up here.
Straight up.
A brief glimpse of it. See it in there? That's condensation all the way to the ground. The rest is dust. Got a very skinny condensation funnel, but you can see the wind extends well wider than the condensation funnel, especially in a high base storm like this. So that's why you want to be careful about getting too close. You see it was still strong in there. I always run into my friends on the side of the road a lot of times. All my friends chase storms too, so we were having a conversation. He was in the vehicle to the left of me. See how it's wobbling too? It's going north, but it's kind of snaking a little bit, going back and forth. You don't have to worry about traffic out there this close either. Somebody's coming through there that's not good. This is in eastern Colorado near the town of Ray, near the Kansas-Colorado border. All the insulation there. You almost see a wave pattern, the gravity waves there. So if there was a hook with this, that would be wrapping around the south side of it. So we had to go through that dirt to get the clear view. There wasn't as much upward motion with this either. You can see it's mainly horizontal. And the ratio between the horizontal winds and the upward winds is called the swirl ratio. I did almost run out of gas here too, so we were almost going to get gas in Ray, Colorado, but we were on empty. We were able to get to a gas station afterwards. That's another reason why you want to be on the up sheer side, so if we did run out of gas, the tornado would just move away from us. I've run out of gas like 50 times in my life, so it's a bad habit. So I always think I can squeeze out more miles. There you can look up at the collar cloud that was rotating around with vortices even in there. I think it was a crane, or it looked like a trailer.
Look out! See the debris, right?
A trailer? Nobody was hurt by this tornado. But you can see the condensation, the collar cloud we call it at the top. That's what that deal is. Well, wait to see the next one, though. So then this one was in southwest Kansas on May 24. This is the one that front cover photo of the presentation was where my car was pretty close to it. This is that one. So. Again, I'm doing a hook flight, so there's actually rain in the south side of this one. I'm on a north-south road. The tornado's moving north, and I'm going through the rain into the hook. And once I get through that rain, then I can just sit right in the back side of it. You really have to know what the tornado's going to do. There are certain situations where you can't do this, but they rarely present themselves. I did this with every tornado that happened this day. There were like 3 of them that were all moving south and north. I was able to punching out. The crowd also thins out a little bit if you do hook slice maneuvers. You can see how you could eventually see, this one didn't have any suction vortices, so maybe it's because there wasn't a lot of friction out in western Kansas, but it had a tendency to not split it into the multiple vortices, or you just couldn't see them in there. That whole funnel in the middle is condensation. It's just rotating fog, basically. And it was even wobbling a little bit west and north, so tornadoes have a tendency to do a left-hand turn as they mature and then rope out. And so you always have to anticipate that left-hand turn also. It can catch you by surprise, but one thing is when you're approaching it from the back, then you can just allow it to do that turn and it'll be in a safer position. But it's just best not to do it. But this is really all that I know is doing this. I feel a lot more in danger, and I'm just crossing the street in a city somewhere. So this is all that it's just whatever reality you're used to. It may seem crazy, but this seems normal to me. And you can see the condensation. This one roped out and then snaked around the road a little bit. So. Thanks. And this is the earlier tornado that we intercepted that day, which I don't know if we have time for, if you want to see it or. Yeah. All right. I love showing them, so. I love talking about storm chasing almost as much as storm chasing. But. So this is the first tornado that day. This is the one before that one that you just saw. Again, an example of how not to stay safe around storms too, which I think could be just as educational, but I'll show you the approach. Look at how clear out they were, how compact the vortices were. I'm due east of it right here looking west, and in a second I'll go north and then due west again because it was doing a left-hand turn. So it was moving further away from this north-south road as it roped out. It was doing a left-hand turn, a left-hand loop. Deploying a probe that was a little outside of it, moving that way. I almost picked it up and brought it with me, but I didn't have a probe at the time. I was just in a rental car and my phone and my handheld camera, so I accidentally streamlined everything since 2012. Not a purpose. But I usually storm chase by myself now. So I was by myself here as well, talking to myself a lot of times. But that's why it's so quiet. Got a little too close to this one. We'll see here at the end. See that swath of hail that was going around? I've never seen that before, but there was a ring of hail that was going around the tornado. You can see it on the ground up there ahead of me. Try to do a reverse hook flight here. You can clearly see the core flow in there. So. Then it knocked down these power lines. That was the only thing I was worried about were power lines, and I was getting hammered by hail when I was holding the camera outside of the vehicle too. But I had all these marks on my rims from a little dime-sized hailstone.
Wow! Right next to the tornado here, southwest Kansas.
You can see that one was roping out and doing that left-hand turn also. It was moving almost due northwest at that point. And this is the super outbreak that we chased, which is April 27, 2011. And I like to storm chase all over the southern U.S., southeast U.S. as well. And there aren't as many storm chasers that like to go into the trees out there, so I feel like it's more beneficial to be out there and have eyes on the storms. And when you chase in Dixie Alley, there are even more storms. They're faster moving, so you have to have a different strategy where you have to bounce from storm to storm. And we saw the EF5 that day in east central Mississippi there. Sadly, over 300 fatalities happened from the super outbreak. And this is one of the few times that I woke up and looked at the computer models and every index for tornadoes was maxed out. The wind shear, the winds near the surface were relatively weak, and then just above the ground they were almost to hurricane force. And so there was a lot of low-level wind shear. It's critical to have for tornadoes to have the low-level wind shear in the lowest kilometer or 500 meters.
397 Philly to Playtown.
But you could definitely tell
look at the horizontal vortices
how
on the left
efficient the
side.
storm was.
Horizontal vortices.
All kinds of vortices streaming into it.
Dick, you wear, okay? You wear. You're good. You wear. It's not moving side to side, which means it's coming right at us right now. We need to be. This house right here. Hey, run up to that house. Get him to take shelter.
There are just people on their porches watching it, right in the path.
It's coming fast.
See how vertical that backside? Look at that's the whole mesocyclone there. You can see how compact it is.
Satellite going around, guys. This thing got a satellite.
In many cases, these storms would produce tornadoes before they even produced rain. The wind shear was so strong.
I have him. Back up. Turn the car around, Joel.
See the upward motion also?
Were you able to get through?
Yes, I caught two.
Look at that left edge.
Reed, that thing's violent.
Go that way. Go that way. Keep an eye on it, Joel. You get ready to deploy.
You're right. Is that it?
That's thunder.
All right. You can see the rolling motion too right there as it gets closer. And this tornado was rated F5, EF5, because it dug a trench in the ground, and that's the first time that's ever happened, I believe. Not necessarily because of the damage that it caused the structures, but because of that trench.
This is not good, guys.
But this was one of the early tornadoes in the super outbreak, and then we saw the Tuscaloosa tornado develop, and it went from a cloud to a tornado in like 15 minutes, it seemed like. You can see the rolling motion. A lot of times you see that with the faster moving tornadoes. But you can't keep up with them. Out here, a lot of the tornadoes you can keep up with. There's a gridded road network. There's not many trees, and so it's much more challenging to chase out there in the southern U.S. and eastern U.S. That's why not many storm chasers will go out there very often.
Right here, guys.
That house dodged it. You see people standing next to the vehicle there watching it. And this is the Tuscaloosa tornado.
It's out! No, it's almost out.
It's barely been producing rain, and then it had a tornado.
Oh my God!
Yeah, see those horizontal vortices? That's because of the updraft will cause horizontal spin that will, there'll be a pressure fall within there, and that's why it condenses. And this is one of the first wedge tornadoes, more significant tornadoes where I saw one of those horizontal donuts around it that are caused by the vertical winds of tornadoes. And when we first saw that, that was what really triggered the interest in measuring the vertical winds in tornadoes with the radar on the Dominators. I have a big soft spot in my heart for hail, too. I love hail a lot, especially the big hail, so I've never had a nice car. Just like to drive beaters around, or sometimes rentals. Well, you can see what it did to the windshield there. That was hail. My first time that I saw a softball-sized hailstone. And then I also like to storm chase in Canada as well, across Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. This tornado was the first one I saw up there in 2007, and it was a massive wedge tornado with the 3 suction vortices there. And back when I first put this together, Canada was new. I thought it was new territory for storm chasers, but now there are all kinds of storm chasers up there. And the Canada Storm Chasing Convention is at the end of this month too. So they are also expanding storm chasing across Canada. Their storm reporting is definitely getting streamlined up there as well. So thank you so much for having me, and I could take any questions as well.
If you have questions, raise your hand. I'll come by with the microphone. We want to get the audio on our live stream and our videos. We'll start up here, up front. Just hold the microphone close to your mouth. If not,
do you have to wear extra protection for your ears because of the pressures?
Yeah, and I meant to say that in that one tornado where the window was blown out, the radar engineer in the back seat, he had clogged sinuses. And our camera guy looked at him and said, "There's blood coming out of your ear." And it was before the window had blown out, and he had a ruptured eardrum from the pressure fall in that one, which is scary. So I wish I had an anemometer on board that was working, but we were measured the wind speed. So.
All right, we have a question on your left over here.
How does the car work? How does the Dominator thingy work?
Well, it has hydraulics, so we could drop the shell to the ground, and then these spikes will shoot into the ground that prevent it from getting moved off the road, because if wind were able to get underneath, then it would potentially be carried away. And it's also very heavy, too. They're about 10,000 pounds, and they have the armor on the outside, too, that protects us from flying debris. But it's still not a good idea, which is why I don't do it anymore. So,
we'll stay back here.
Oh, I had 2 quick questions. Do the rental car companies know who you are now?
No, they don't. Not yet, unless they're watching this, I guess.
And then I saw a report in Hurricane Harvey that when it was coming ashore, that inside the eye were a lot of birds. Was that true? That
yeah.
You could see them in the radar?
Yeah, you can see them visually, too, inside the eye. Almost every hurricane I've been in, there are birds that will get trapped in the eye, and then when they're driving around, they'll crash into the vehicle because they're fatigued. So they pick up birds and they go over islands, and you'll see seagulls just like flopping on the ground, and they're tired when it comes ashore. So, yeah.
I have a question in the back of the room here.
How much wind speed can a tornado get up to?
We don't really know exactly if the wind speed inside those suction vortices are 2 to 4 times, and it could be well in excess of 200 miles an hour, I believe, even over 300 miles an hour or stronger on the real small scales.
All right, hang on to your left here, Paula.
So what scares you?
Probably human beings more than Mother Nature, I think. Yeah, I'm definitely, I'm scared of heights, certainly. Yeah, I don't like the hikes that you go. I'm afraid of parasitic worms, things like that, parasites. Like that show Monsters Inside Me, I would not watch that. So.
You had that one photo there of 3 vortices coming out of the one storm, and it kind of reminded me of Joplin. Wasn't Joplin multiple vortices that went through Joplin several years back? How does something like that happen? I mean,
a lot of those wedge tornadoes are multiple vortex because when they interact with the friction of the earth, the wind right near the ground is initially slowed down, so then it's out of balance with the low pressure in there, and then the wind turns cross isobaric, it's called, where it goes in toward the low pressure, but because there's so much stretching above it, it creates vortices as well and stretches those into the vertical. So it's like a figure skater. When they pull in their arms, they spin faster. And then you get those that spin around, and then it'll go back to one vortex and morph into suction vortices, and they seem to change. Every tornado is different. I've never seen 2 that look exactly the same.
So it comes out of the same wall cloud then when that happens?
Out of the same tornado and the same wall cloud above it. And then the mesocyclone above could have multiple tornadoes in the ground. So a lot of times you'll hear storm chasers say, "Look at that mesocyclone," but they're looking at a wall cloud, but it's really more of a tornado cyclone at that point, where the mesocyclone is the bigger rotating updraft above it, that mothership that you see sometimes.
Could the Dominator withstand a grenade?
Oh yeah, a lot of, yeah, it definitely can. Could handle a grenade. Yeah, probably better than a tornado. Thankfully, we haven't had that happen though.
Hang on, let me, excuse me.
How do you decide where to go and when?
That's definitely the hardest part, both of those. But you look at computer forecast models where the ingredients are going to come together over a certain region. You look at the timing of when those ingredients will come together. Usually here in the plains, the storms happen in the afternoon and evening. But a lot of times, especially out east in Dixie Alley, they call it, you can get tornadoes at night. And I've seen a strong tornado at like 10 in the morning before out there with, and so, yeah, you just have to look at the timing of when the ingredients will be together. And if you don't have storms in that environment, then you won't get a tornado, even if all the ingredients are maxed out. So you also need to have storms, and they need to be the right mode as well. They have to be isolated supercells, and there's a lot of different factors that go into it. All I've ever done is look at radar, though, and models my whole life. So it's definitely, but you're always learning. I make huge mistakes all the time, which is what is cool about storm chasing, is how challenging it is. That you definitely have to be humble, because I'll drive from Oklahoma up to Alberta, Canada, and not see a single storm, and then have to drive all the way back and think about it. So, yeah.
Explain the classic hook, whatever, that you talked about early.
Yeah,
Explain
I'll show a slide.
exactly.
I have a slide that I could explain it better here too. So this is a hook echo on a normal radar, like a WSR 88D radar site. And so you can see the hook-like appendage on the southwest side. That's the mesocyclone, or the rotating updraft of the storm. And then all the red there is a downdraft. That's the rain and the hail that's falling. And so the updraft goes, and then the stronger winds aloft will carry all the hail and the rain, and it falls downstream to the northeast of it. And so that hook echo, a little sheath of rain will wrap around the mesocyclone. And so when I would do a hook slice from this, I'd be going from west to east along that road. I would punch through the rain and the hook, and then look to the southeast and potentially see a high contrast tornado, because the radar here can't resolve the tornado. It's smaller than the resolution of the radar, but you can see the mesocyclone. In this case, it had a tornado on the ground, but that's also why you need storm chasers, is to confirm that there are tornadoes there.
But the maneuver is coming from the windward side.
Upstream, yeah. Yes, yeah. And so then, since the tornado is moving west to east, you can always stop and allow the tornado to go east. So, but I had to make a lot of errors. So when I started storm chasing the wrong way, where I didn't go with somebody with experience. I just hopped in a car with 5 of my other freshman friends, and we just started storm chasing. And it took me a lot longer to learn that way. I knew that the tornado was on the south side of the storm, but we didn't have the resources that people have today, where you can learn online. And I mean, there are kids now that are like 15 years old and are storm chasing experts before they're even driving now, because of all the access to technology and, the videos. And the next generations are really going to take our science to the next level. There'll probably be drones, self-driving cars out there, and it'd be a lot easier if I didn't have to drive so many miles. I'm basically a professional driver, so and a very small part of that are you actually chasing a storm.
Hey, Reed, over here on your left. So we've had 2 massive hurricanes with a lot of rain, a record rain, 50 inches. I'm just curious what you think about climate change and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think it's dangerous to relate any individual storm to climate change. And that happened in 2005 as well with Katrina, Rita, and the active 2004 season. And it was proven, there were studies that showed that that's well within the realm of natural variability. But I do think that global warming is obviously happening. I think a part of it is man-made, and I don't think the frequency of the hurricanes will likely change, but their intensity probably will. They're going over warmer water. They're able to intensify faster. They're able to hold more moisture. The sea levels are rising, so storm surge is becoming more of a problem. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those hybrid-type storms, too, like Sandy, or the ones that are transitioning to extratropical. We'll probably see tropical systems later on in the seasonal cycle. But there's also likely going to be more frequent and stronger El Niños in the Pacific, and so that, it doesn't always mean there's going to be worst storms. I think that global warming could even have a dampening effect on tornadoes because, or at least in spring and summer tornadoes, but wintertime tornadoes may be more frequent. But usually La Nina events are generally related to more tornadoes in the spring and summer across traditional Tornado Alley. And the 2011 season was when temperatures were below normal in the tropical Pacific. And so I think there are all different kinds of impacts that will become apparent over the coming decades and years. But I think that these storms, there was a 1935 hurricane on Labor Day that was the worst that they've ever had in the Keys, and this one wasn't as strong as that. And there's the Galveston hurricane as well. That was before those times as well. That was one of the worst that we've ever had. And so strong, devastating hurricanes have always been a part. And I mean, imagine when Pangea was there, how strong the hurricanes were likely then. And so who knows what will happen, but that's the scary part. So.
Reed, we'll stay up here for the next question, and due to the time, let's do 2 more questions.
Tim, thank you for being here tonight. It's been very informative. The movie Twister debuted in the fall of 1997, and it sounds like it may have affected your life in some ways because you started studying meteorology in '98, is that correct?
That was when I was a freshman. I knew I wanted to be in weather since I was like 5 years old. I was still standing out in the front yard, and whenever severe thunderstorm warnings get issued, I'd run outside, and I wrote the Weather Channel in the early 90s about storm chasing, and they sent me a letter back from their legal department. It said that storm chasing is only for professionals, it's dangerous, the Weather Channel does not advocate it at all, and I got that letter. But one person that did respond to me back then was Tim Marshall. Yeah, he's a very well-known storm chaser and damage assessment engineer now, and he was someone that really inspired me to get into storm chasing, and Twister definitely didn't hurt the cause. So.
Yeah. After a lot of these events, you'll find that there'll be a mass of kids that want to study meteorology after a major tornado outbreak like Joplin or the hurricanes that just happened. You'll see a wave of students signing up at universities to study, and it's always fascinating to find out if there was a specific weather event that caused you to go into this.
There is, and when I was about 4 or 5 years old, my dad was taking us to catch minnows, and I was riding in a wagon, and I remember the tornado sirens going off, and he said that there was a rope tornado in the distance, and he was still just walking real methodically and slow. So I never panicked, but then when we got closer to my house, my mom was outside just freaking out. I remember her reaction. That's what I remember, was the panic reaction. I think that's why it stood out in my head, was I've never seen my mom panic like that until that happened. And I remember the guy was delivering newspapers and he wasn't using the handlebars and was like hauling at, or going really fast through the neighborhood. And then so, yeah, I remember that when I was little. So I think that was really kind of it was very scary. And then there's a fine line between fear and curiosity, and I became obsessed with storms ever since then. I'd watch the weather on TV nonstop, and I love snowstorms and lake effect snow. And I collected insects for a long time too, though, and when I was in Science Olympiad, I did the weather event and tree identification and the reptiles and amphibians, and I was too small to play sports because I was a late bloomer too, but I was more obsessed with the sciences at that point, so I still am now. So.
Reed, we have a question back here.
So in one of the opening videos, you showed the Mike Bettis incident in El Reno, and we know that Tim Samaras tragically died that day. What was different about that storm compared to other storms?
It expanded so rapidly, and it was 2.5 miles wide. It was wider than any other tornado, and the suction vortices inside that were up to 1/4 mile wide at times. And it went from being probably a 1/2 mile wide to 1/4 mile wide to 2.5 miles wide in a very short amount of time as it was moving that left-hand turn. So it was a very unique tornado, and I was doing a hook slice on that one too with the Dominator, and we ran into power lines right when the tornado was just to our southeast, and the power lines got wrapped around the light bar on the hood, and we couldn't free ourselves, and so Sean put the car reverse and backed up, and it tightened the power lines so tight that it shot the hood off like a Frisbee. And we never found the hood, but we had to do the rest of the storm chase with no hood on that day, and I'm wondering if that hitting that power line helped us in some way, as the tornado was about to do that left-hand turn, and it would have been a situation where you wait and allow it to turn left, and then, but I didn't realize it was such a we had just seen the Bennington, Kansas tornado a few days before, which was the one with the air cannon, which was my probably closest experience to being with close to a tornado. And then after that, we were chasing El Reno. I didn't realize the significance of it until we came to Highway 81. I saw all these vehicles off in the ditch, and the first one we saw was that Weather Channel vehicle. So I ran out there, and Mike Bettis was there. He was in a daze, and the vehicle had rolled, and thankfully everybody was okay. They were injured, but they were okay there. And then the next morning, then I found out about the tragic loss of my idol, one of the best storm chasers and a pioneer in tornado science. And it was just such a unique tornado like that. It expanded so rapidly in a short amount of time.
All right, Dr. Timmer, thank you so much for the wonderful lecture.
Thank you. Thanks.